Today, I want to talk about things that people look for, things that people really value, that do not correlate with the company necessarily doing well, and do not correlate often with the salesperson making a whole lot of money. Now, you might be asking, who am I and what do I know? My name is Sam Marilich. I've been recruiting salespeople for B2B SaaS startups since August 2016. I've hired more than 30 salespeople at over 40 different startups. I've talked to thousands of salespeople over the last 8 years. I run my own recruiting agency these days. Some of the companies I've worked with that have been backed by investors that you probably recognize. And I think just a point I want to make, the companies that I work with are often quite early stage. That's why these companies bring in someone like myself, is so that they can find really good talent that hasn't otherwise heard about them. Samsara, for example, are currently a publicly traded company. When I started working with them back in 2016, they had like 30 people, right? So the first thing, and this one is the biggest one by far, it is people looking for a high OTE or high on-target earnings. Now, on-target earnings, usually that is base salary plus variable. If you hit this number, you will get paid this amount. Any number after that is just uncapped commission. Frankly, like if you are not on an uncapped commission plan, you are in a bad place. But the thing that we need to talk about with OTE is that it is totally made up. And the number one question I get in terms of replies to emails, in terms of replies to my outreach is, what is the OTE? Now, I'm not here to tell you that compensation is unimportant. I think it's extremely important. I always want to talk to people about it on the first call, but you have to be super, super aware of how much of every dollar are you keeping, right? So if we take in a standard example, a $200,000 OTE on an $800,000 quota. Usually that is a $100,000 base salary and then a $100,000 variable piece of the pie. You close 800K, you're making that 200. You close 900, you're making more than that, right? A very tempting outreach that you're likely to see would be, hey, we're going to give you a 250K OTE, $25,000 in additional base salary, and then a hypothetical additional $25,000 if you hit your quota. But if we've moved the quota from 800K to 1.25 million, that $25,000 in additional base salary is another $450,000 in quota that you need to hit. You need to remember that the variable is more or less like that's only there if you hit it, right? OTE is an entirely made up concept. If I am selling a bad role because I am an unethical VP of sales, that would be the first thing I would move up. I had a candidate a few years ago. This guy was doing really, really well. And he had a 180K OTE, 90-90 split on a 720K number. And we got him another job offer at a similar sort of numbers, right? So 180K OTE, 720 on the quota. He didn't take it, which is fair enough. It wasn't a jump. Right. And I was like, this is not super competitive. But where I think this guy really set himself up for a very difficult year after was he went to a company where he got a 220K OTE, but the quota was 1.1 million. So again, instead of keeping 25 cents on the dollar, he was keeping 20 cents on the dollar. The product was also harder to sell. Also, to a worse buyer persona, it was more of a nice to have than a need to have. This is something that you just need to be super, super careful of because it is such a common tactic. And frankly, people just fall for it. That's why it works, right? A lot of people, they just fall for these high OTEs. Don't let it be you. Second one, title inflation. This is especially true if you're an SDR. If you're an SDR and you're desperate for an account executive promotion, there are two ways that you can get burned. The first one is an account executive role that's really a dead end. Something like selling ads at Yelp or selling ads at Glassdoor. You want to go somewhere where it's a little bit more of a technical sell to a bit more of an advanced buyer. They're often going to put you back into an SDR role. So be super, super careful. Look at, hey, people that have, this role at this sort of company, where do they go 2-3 years after that? The other one, and this is especially true for startups, is, we'll hire some SDRs into an account executive role, but we don't have any product market fit. You are cheap. That is what you are being used for. You're going to jump because you need the title. Be careful. Now, third one, This is not really a red flag. This is not really a yellow flag. I just want to call this out because it is a reality. Fully remote roles are super, super in demand. A lot of people want to work fully remote. When there is a lot of demand, it is very easy to pull a lot of candidates. So if we're selling a crappy role, we'll probably make it fully remote. Fourth thing, and this one, it's not super true, 2023, 2024. This was extremely true 2021, 2022, where the companies were raising enormous amounts of money at very, very high valuations. And while, when companies raise money, it's not debt that they are raising. It sort of functions like a debt. And what I mean by that is if you are a company and you raise at a $4 billion valuation, then you're probably going to want to go public at a, say, $5 billion valuation. But, you're currently a private investment. So a lot of the rigors that go with being a publicly traded company just aren't applied to that. The venture capitalists are betting on where that company is going to be in 2 years, 3 years from now. Whereas the public markets, they're really saying like, let's just look at this in the stone cold sober light of day, and that day is today. So if you've raised at that $4 billion valuation and you want to go public at a $5 billion valuation, well, the company might need to be at a $500 million annual recurring number. Now, that's not an issue if you're at 350 right now, 350 million. But if you're at 25 million in annual recurring revenue, that company is not going to go public anytime soon. I also want to just call this out because this is a nuanced point. I got this number from a SaaStr article back in 2019, so the numbers are probably higher. The average VC-backed startup that went public raised more than $370 million. So again, just think of it in terms of like, how far does this company have to go for it to be feasible for it to be a public company? Do they need to double revenue? That's probably not an issue. Do they need to 500x revenue in order to go public? Because the more they have to increase revenue, just the further out that IPO is going to happen, the further out any equity you see will actually be worth anything and will be able to be traded for cash. Fifth thing, and this one, again, it's kind of a yellow flag. If we look at companies like Andreessen Horowitz and Sequoia, they are great venture funds. They've done a lot of investments. Each of them have done more than 1,000 investments over the last 10 years. They've both led more than 500 rounds. Now, these funds are great. I've got nothing bad to say about them. And I've actually worked with a lot of their portfolio companies. But, I'm just going to move my head out of the way. You cannot allow the social proof of, hey, Andreessen Horowitz invested, to stop you doing your own due diligence. That is my key point here. You cannot let the fact that this company has raised a whole lot of money from a good VC color your thinking. You need to be thinking about yourself, and you need to be thinking about the context of your career. Now, if you are a sales rep, I have a course that you might find useful. It's a one-time payment. I'm not particularly interested in upselling you a mastermind, but what I do want to share is things like, how do you work with external recruiters? How do we think? How do we act? How are we incentivized? How should you judge new opportunities? How do you make a really good resume and LinkedIn? Should you go and be a first sales hire? What should you do if you've been fired? How do you set yourself up for long-term career success? You can get into that. The link is going to be below. Otherwise, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you on the next video. Cheers.